Okay, so we're recording. It's just, whoops. There. I just kind of want to get an idea of what, when we're pushing around like this, what it's showing. In terms of the
I think
board.
what you probably have to do there, Bob, is maximize your Zoom. It isn't. Do up that.
Hey, Bob.
Hey, Cody.
Do up that PowerPoint so that you can share it. It'll be on the majority of the screen.
Okay, so Jason, maybe you can give me a hand here. I think that. So we just need to get up to the view.
Yeah, use a piece of paper there.
There. And then,
And do you have this PowerPoint loaded?
well, it's in his email. I
Okay, so
can,
I'll open it right now.
there, and there it is.
Do that. So double click that. I think you previewed it.
Send everything as a PDF just in case
There,
Microsoft doesn't want to play nicely.
There you go.
okay.
And now you can start the slideshow. Over, can't see this one of these, like that one right there.
Oh, this one down here?
Yeah, that.
Okay, but we don't need to do it now.
Yeah.
We just go back to Zoom. There. There. That isn't going to show you very well.
Yeah, well, what I was, let's do that here. Let's do this. Go back to the Zoom. Let's maximize that. Okay. Share.
There.
So we're going to do the PowerPoint. We're going to maximize that. And then on the Zoom, we will share screen. That's the PowerPoint. And that's what we'll have.
Okay.
Nice.
And I think we can click that at the time and then that'll go away.
Click
And
which
it, and here, just go ahead and do it right now. Click that.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, that's just the way it's gonna be, so.
Okay. Okay. We have one caller. And who's on the phone? There's Ross. The 805 350 9169. Can you tell me who you are?
Sure. This is Peter Garcia with the San Ynez Water District.
Oh, Peter, it's Bob Peralt. We have yet to meet in person, but glad to have you here.
Good evening, Bob. Thank you very much.
We're having to do this by Zoom, so.
I completely understand. We're in the same boat.
Okay, so we'll just see how this works.
Say 10 seconds. I just texted you ETA. You should have said 10 seconds. Not listening.
Brian?
Jason. Unbelievable you're here. Unbelievable. Thank you. 2.5 hours from Carpenter. I'm in Santa Maria today, so.
Jason, what was your last name?
Johnston with a T.
So we need one more member to have a quorum. Should I text Brian?
Brian's here. I just texted Brian. It would be
Brad.
Brad.
Should I text Brad?
Yeah, I would. He's stuck in Santa Barbara. I don't know what we do.
Have the meeting open?
What's that?
Do you have the meeting open?
Well, it's recording.
No, I mean, is it online?
It is, yeah, it's both.
I'm just thinking maybe Mike, got to have a heck of a commute, almost 2 blocks.
Want to see something crazy?
Sit down for about a half hour.
No,
The benefits of having an office in Santa Maria. Last 2 days I was up there. Check this out. I could go walk every lunch.
Right over the top.
Are you a professional pipe player? Is that what your office is?
Yeah. Office on Foster.
Okay.
I got a text.
Yeah. The interesting thing I saw there today is the first time I've ever seen a converted 737
737?
to a air tanker. Yeah. Those ones with the four jets on the upper wing, or not really an upper wing, it's kind of a mid wing.
Yeah.
It's here's Brad.
okay.
Those are Canadian planes, I think. If I remember right, Bombardier. And I almost think those things are made for big aerial attacks.
Bombardier.
Bombardier, and
They're Nova Scotia or BC or something like that. And they have the best contract. They have the best going. And last year, with all the fires, they maxed out all of the help and everything that was, and they wouldn't let those guys in because they couldn't contract outside of the US. So they worked.
all right, well, I have 6:07 and we have a quorum, so I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Los Olivos Community Services District for October 13th, 2021. Baroque, and we have a roll call.
Yes, Vice President and Acting President Pharaoh.
Here.
Director O'Neill.
Here.
Director Ross.
Here.
Director Army. Guess he's not on. And President Lisa Palmer is absent.
Okay, everyone would join and we'll face the flag. Ready to begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You. Move on to item 4, director comments. Directors will give reports on any meetings that they attended on behalf of the district or choose to comment on district activities. We'll start my left with Director Ross.
No comments at this time.
Director O'Neill.
No comment except GSI folks were supposed to come and obviously not. All that stuff. Next month.
Well, certainly we can do that. It's at the pleasure of the board.
I have 8 questions for GSI.
I think maybe what we'll do is we'll go to that and we'll discuss, hear it, discuss it, take public comment, and if the board chooses to table it, then we'll take that. But I would have to agree. So public comment, members of the public may address the board on any item of interest within the subject matter and jurisdiction of the board, but not on the agenda today. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Due to requirements of the Brown Act, the district cannot take action on any matter not on the agenda. The matters raised during public comments can refer to district staff for possible future action. Do we have any public comments?
Question?
With public comment,
Okay.
could I have your name, please?
Laura Lippincott?
Laura Lippincott, thank you.
I just am wondering, the new plant, I understand you're gonna be pulling nitrates and yada yada out of the water. That's what's polluting everything. What do you do with those then?
We're not really pulling anything out of the water. We're just stopping any more going down into the ground.
But don't you have some kind of filter that's gonna get caught
Okay,
in?
so public comment is for making comments. It's not really,
Not really for questions.
well, it's not for questions. It's for, so if you were to state that you have, you want to maybe hear how that would happen, I might encourage you to contact Mr. Perot and maybe he could describe how the plant works. And also there is information on the website from one of the plants that we're talking about as close. Yeah. maybe after the
What?
meeting.
After the meeting, I'd be happy.
If you want to catch a director and talk that way, that would be appropriate.
Just wondering.
Is there anybody online, Pro, that wants to speak?
Let's ask that question so we can be sure that those that are on the Zoom call, is there anybody in the public that would like to speak under public comment?
I don't have any comments at this time, Bob. Thanks for asking.
Okay, it's Cody Seiler, no comment.
Okay, so I'll close the public comment section then, and we'll move on to item 6, which is, we just talked about, is, oh, no, I'm sorry, no, Santa Barbara County Environmental Health Services discussion regarding on-site wastewater treatment system requirements. And today from our EHS staff, we have Jason Johnston, and we want to thank Jason for taking time out of his day to come and be with us down here. We really appreciate you taking your personal time to be down here. So we will turn it over to you. There is a PowerPoint. Maybe you can either move it by hand if you want, and then when we're complete, I'm sure we'll have questions. So thank you, Mr. Johnston.
Good evening.
It's awkward.
Advance it. So I wanted to do a brief overview of what your current system is, the septic system, just so we're kind of all understanding the same thing. Wastewater flows from your fixtures through piping to a tank. The tank is a 2-compartment tank that does both a physical and biological treatment of the wastewater before it flows to the dispersal field where it percolates down into the ground. All these images are from the EPA. We have a septic smart program. And if you want information, I can easily give that to you, or it's on the PowerPoint.
So what is that, an advanced treatment plant for individual residents?
This is just your standard septic system.
Oh, that's the standard.
Yeah. Here's your standard septic tank. It's a 2-compartment tank. could be concrete, fiberglass, some sort of resin. It does the physical treatment, so it separates the solids, which sink and become sludge, the fats, oils, greases, and other material floats to the top as a scum layer, and that liquid flows to the second compartment where there's still some more physical separation before it flows up to the dispersal field. So the physical is that separation, but also it's bacterial. There's anaerobic bacteria that digest the wastewater and do some of that treatment before it flows to your dispersal field. Again, it's an EPA figure, so it mentions the effluent filter is optional. In this county, any new system or any repair or work that happens under permit needs to install one. If you don't have an effluent filter, we highly recommend it. It prevents solids and scum from flowing into the dispersal field, which causes dispersal field failure. This gives a very high level overview of regulations related to septic systems in the state. The overarching policy is the state's outs policy, and that's required by water code, and it defines the regulations and standards of constructing and operating a septic system. It does provide for a waiver of waste discharge requirements, which is a reporting requirement to the state. And it has 4 different tiers of construction standards and requirements. In this county, we have a local agency management program, or a LAMP, which means we're in the tier 2 category. It allows us more flexibility than the standard tier 1 requirements that cover the state. And that was authorized by the Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors and then approved by the Regional Water Board. It was authorized back in 2013 to develop and approved by the Water Board in 2015. And then county code is the basic construction standards for septic systems in the county. And those were approved in 2015. And so for in the interim between now and when a sewer system or a community sewer system's in place, any change from county code in the LAMP would require discussions with the regional board and approval by Board of Supervisors. And we are in discussions with them to see what leeway or exceptions can be made for having systems between now and sewer. That way repairs or work that needs to occur doesn't have to be fully what would be required by code. So in the Los Olivos area, a dispersal field failure right now would require supplemental treatment or an aerobic treatment system. So you basically are installing a mini wastewater plant on your property, plus doing your dispersal field repair. So that's one thing we're going to talk to the board about is ways to avoid supplemental treatment for those interim repairs until sewer is available. But we are interested in any comments or recommendations, anything public would like us to discuss with the regional board, because it is your community and we value your input.
So right now, if someone has a failure, could they say they're not run out and quickly put in the advanced treatment thing in their front yard or backyard? So they should talk to the county first and kind of find out what leniency there is in the interim period. Is that true?
If you have a failure, you either have wastewater backing up into your house or you have wastewater pooling in your yard. So it's not something where you can just not do anything about. But to issue a permit that is compliant with code, you would have to install supplemental treatment and dispersal. So that's why we want to discuss with the board ways to modify the current regulations for those systems. That makes sense.
Yes, I think so. Sometimes people have tanks that are cracked So it may not be a major issue, but maybe it's not the code.
And-
So that's the kind of
Yeah. And so-
interim issue we want
Well,
to figure
and
out.
these are the very questions that I think kick this discussion on how long, Director O'Neill, at least a year or more, where we had individuals that were having septic issues, and we brought the concern to EHS that by requiring them to go to advanced treatment, which is an expensive option, and then asking them to pay for their share of the sewer system is in effect, well, there's a level of fairness that's not fair. And on the other hand, we're manufacturing opposition to our assessment vote, and will undermine the very topic that we're seeing.
And supplemental treatment would only be required for a dispersal field replacement. If you're doing just your tank, if your tank is damaged to where it's not watertight anymore, it's not functioning, you'd be replacing the tank. And you wouldn't be doing the whole system,
Which is still about 10,000.
which, exactly.
So I have more comments and questions, but maybe you could get through your presentation just so that we don't
Yep.
break your flow.
Yep.
Well, now that we've broken it, one little clarification though, to your advantage is very important to say the difference between failure and repair. Okay, and one of the things that we have historically, let's just say us, not the board, but we are residents. We've come across discrepancies when going down to the county, North County, South County, I think it's Tuesday or Wednesday, whoever's at the table, of saying, oh no, anything is ATS. And no, we are clarifying through, working together and bringing in the board to get those things settled in. And you just nailed it going, hey, failure, what the heck is going on. It's, it's coming out of your shower. Repair, it's a different deal. And now we're clarifying that through working with you guys. And the idea of the temporary, or whatever, the interim measures that we're dealing with were brought up by this board approach to the water board and the EHS to initiate what's happening now. We are not there, but our goal is to clarify what you talked about and come up with what Tom talked about, an interim solution, because people are screaming for it. And, that's something that we feel is unfair and needs to be looked at. So thank you. And I go for it. I was trying to support you there a little bit.
Yep, and I didn't go fully into the whole thing because there's such a variety of pathways, but failure is the dispersal field is not taking effluent. You don't have functioning wastewater in your house. And it could be that a root or the lateral between the tank and the dispersal field is clogged with roots or other material to where it's slowing flow. That does happen, where the T is shifted at some point. And so it appears high, and once everything's corrected, it's back to flowing normal. So it's not ever as simple as we wish it would be. And so that's one thing to consider also.
And that's what we're trying to clarify
Yeah.
for everybody, which is great. Thank you.
This is just a quick slide showing all the different things you can do to maintain your system. Not having a running sink or running toilet or a leaky faucet. The more water you put down the system, the more water the field has to absorb, more strains on it. It's a bacterial system, so if you use heavy caustic chemicals, bleaches, stuff like that, it does degrade the performance. It won't work as well. If you have a salt water softener that discharges to your septic tank, that's a bad idea. It'll eventually also cause it to fail. EPA Septic Smart has a whole bunch of things, but those are the high level ones, is keeping your water flow as low as you can, preventing leaks, avoiding chemicals down the drain. If you're not really using garbage disposal, scraping food off into a trash can, that way it reduces the load on the system. Here's some resources, which I believe are all on the fact sheet that the district put out already. And then there's my contact information, both email and phone number. And if you have any comments or questions, I'm available.
Well, thank you. And maybe, Bob, you can post this PowerPoint to our
Sure.
website so the public can get it. I like, it's packed with the key information, but you know, when someone opens up a 45-page PowerPoint, you immediately say, okay, well, I'm done with this one. So thank you for that. I had a couple of comments and questions for you, Jason. Well, one, a comment. So about a month ago, I had my tank pumped out. Maybe you saw the report. I don't know if you see the report, but I was very torn on whether or not to do that because I was fearful because I have heard of other people and some people I know were, depending on the contractor, you know, I don't know if every contractor and every operator of a septic tank truck is qualified to determine if a tank needs to be replaced or not, as opposed to an engineer. So I had that concern. But I had it pumped out and I was fine. So I'm glad I did it.
I'll provide a quick comment there.
Yeah.
It is recommended that you do pump your tank every 3 to 5 years because as the solids build up, it reduces the capacity of the tank, which means you're more likely to get solids into the secondary and then into the dispersal field, which is why that filter is important. The filter would become clogged, which is an issue, but it means your dispersal field's not being impacted by solids, which will destroy your dispersal field. So it is recommended to have your tank pumped. It will make the system
And
function.
I've done that. I maybe went a little bit longer this time out of that fear. And I think that's what we want to assure our residents. We want them to pump their tanks regularly. I want to pump my tank regularly, but then you have that fear of what might happen. So we fully support your effort on that one. Thank you. And one question I had, then I'll get other board questions and then we'll ask the public. When I had my tank pumped, I was recommended to flush these bacteria supplemental bags. I've heard both ways, that's a good idea or that's a bad idea. And I think the last I saw, the EPA recommends it. Can you advise us whether that's a good idea and what frequency?
We don't recommend it. We don't recommend against it. I haven't seen anything that supports it either way fully. It is a bacterial system, but there's bacteria that's already going down there. I don't know if it works.
Yeah, I'm in your camp. I suppose what I think is, I convinced myself, well, I don't know that it would ever hurt. But I don't know if it works at all.
I'd avoid any chemicals though.
Yeah.
There's a
Chemicals,
chemical-
and then I totally echo your sentiment that I've tried over the years is don't use your garbage disposal except for those few items that you absolutely have to do. Your trash cans, the right place for that. Okay, I think that's all the questions I have right now. Mr. Ross?
Yeah, question. So when they pump out the tank, they record, I guess, the thickness of solids. And I think there's a recommendation for how thick it can get before you really need to pump. So if you know how long it's been since the last time and you know the thickness, you can kind of figure out if you could wait longer the next time or whatever. Is that anywhere like a simple equation or a way to tell people that, hey, that you can figure out how often to pump out by looking at thickness? And
I'd have to look and see. It would probably depend on your tank size and the shape of it. And so it's probably better off. And plus, if you're paying someone to come out and service your tank, I don't know cost difference of that versus just pumping it out every 3 to 5 years. Plus you have the scum layer. So I don't know if it really buys you much by gauging tank thickness. The concern with anyone just popping the lids off their tank is it is anaerobic bacteria, so it creates hydrogen sulfide. So if you pull the tank lid off and put your face down there, you can be hit by hydrogen sulfide, which can acetate you and potentially kill you. So it is a confined space and there is that hazard. So generally we don't advise people to just pull their lid off unless they know what they're getting into and they have some precautions in place.
yeah, well, I guess what I've been doing it about every 5 years. And I also look at the report to see what the thickness of the solids is. And I just have this feeling maybe we should be educating people about how to look at that report and then understand how to adjust their timing.
I think it's also a function of the number of people in your household. Like right now, it's just my wife and I having extricated our kids from our household. Whereas if you have a family of 4 or 5 in the same tank, that's going to be a different story. So yeah, maybe we can think about working with EHS and having some type of guide that depending on how many persons in your household. Like now with my wife and I, I think 3 or even 5, I would be comfortable with 5 years based on what I saw when we pumped it out, having gone probably a little over 5 years. I would feel comfortable with 5 years, but if you had 5 people in your house, I wouldn't.
Right. The people I've talked to don't seem to understand how to evaluate how often they should be pumping. So you're right, it depends on how many people are using the system, but the pump out data can also provide a check on that. I just think we need to help people understand that.
Rick, the only question.
Oh, I got a lot.
Yeah, I bet you
I got a lot. First off, I'm going to apologize too, because our eminent president has sent me a bunch of things too. To make sure that she takes care of, but and there's no softballs in there, obviously. Before I begin, I have a very strong view in wastewater engineer and put together a lot of industrial plants and residential or commercial plants. Very strong on what to put down the toilet with those starter bags. Also with the solid levels, as you indicated, size of tank, configuration of tank, usage, the variables are huge. And also, so those are like usage variables. The other variables that we're talking about are filtration rates, how much rain we got, what we don't have rain. It's simple that we came across, and it's accepted. It's 3 to 5 years. That's a huge fail deal. Don't go near it. Don't look for it. Don't open the tank. Okay. Also confined space, but just call somebody. And if you're experiencing odors or you're experiencing stuff coming up or dead spots in your yard, maybe you want to take a look at those visual indicators. If not, 5 years. So, but I didn't say that as, I said that as a I want to get down into, I know that this board has been working with the EHS, and because of the Brown Act, there's a lot of people in that, and my recommendation was always having Director Farrell and Director Palmer and 10. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to first question you guys, not you, but the EHS on what they're doing for, in accordance with the community plan, the Sentinez plan, all these other things that all the documents have been around for a long time about assessing the groundwater condition. Okay. Maybe that can't be answered right now, but, and we don't really need to go into it too much. But just want to make sure that that's on the radar for this meeting. The next one is going to take after the water board report that was done. I call it the Feel the Ocean report. There were indications of off-site mitigating or migration into the area, and along with the groundwater. Then basically on the top. So let's just do those right now.
Okay. I'll start with
Easy one.
2000, I think it was 2019 or 2020 report. That was based on generally, I think actually all production domestic water wells. So they were screened all over the place. I don't know if all the screens were totally known. So without representative monitoring wells that are screened at the respective depths, could be an apples to oranges comparison of the different areas. But yes, that would be one thing. And I know this board is looking at, or as a submittal for installing monitoring wells within the district's boundaries, that would give representative data of actual conditions for just this district, rather than the individual production wells that are used in that report.
Yeah, so more studies are required. I put words in your mouth from that report. And, you know, they're few and far between. That report and the historical report indicate that there are wells that were used back in 72, let's call it, okay? There's no indication that those have been properly managed. And one of the things that we do know is where this was back in 72, and my personal concerns is that they're acting as conduits into the shallow. So one of the things I'm gonna ask, that I would like to encourage is a rapid program to evaluate the locations. I know they're still around.
Can you see any of them?
I looked.
Can you send me them?
Yeah, because the report just has big circles.
Yes. Well, and that's before the permitting.
That was way, yeah.
Yeah, so there's no permit record. The only DWR could have some permits if permits were ever pulled, but I doubt it.
There's none that I've been
Yeah.
able to find. I expect you to find them. And the only way was walking my dog and getting yelled at by people in the yards. But I really want to put that as a priority to get these things fixed. God, I have no ambition that it's happened, but where I used to grow up, people would find a little hole in the ground, and all of a sudden that the septic tank, their cousin lived in the van. So, plus the shop walk. What about offsite migration?
Offsite migrating on to the district
Income.
from the various agricultural sources surrounding the district.
Upgrade. Again, that answer came. Yeah, because I'm answering my own questions. Yeah, so as you can tell by my questions, I am a large advocate of get this water program in place. And, so finally on that, what can we do to help?
I think you already have a submittal from, I don't remember. GSI to do some of that.
Right.
I know it is a high dollar amount. I know it's more than we have funds for to support. But I think we are seriously considering assisting with it because it would support understanding the groundwater in this area. It is a community benefit to see what the groundwater conditions are.
Further comment on that. I've done a lot of groundwater programs. Without a baseline understanding of where we are, let's just say it's at 10 right now. Until we resolve the background, when we're stuck doing the cleaning up, we can never come up with a point where we are done. So it's a continuation. I've seen this. I've made a lot of money on it by going over and over and never resolving the issue. So it's critical that we establish a base and background for it. And I believe that we missed a large opportunity with Maddie's Cabin. But
They are installing at least one.
yeah, but the background.
Yeah.
Now it's going to be on site. So what I'm encouraging too through the GSI program is for us to get a well in that. I have personal interest in that, so that well, that baseline monitoring well could actually be turned. So I'd like to do that and initial funding up front.
And one of the grant funds we gave was to install at least one well.
Thank you for that.
And so
That's
hopefully
probably
that,
the most critical.
so I think that was to design a study and to install at least one well, so there is some sampling. So hopefully that does happen sooner than later.
Yes. Okay, you ready? Don't shoot the messenger. Okay. This is from our student president. Examples of other districts that underwent subject to sewer conversion. What worked, what did not work for them in terms of creating incentives for and helping property owners successfully and cost effectively transition. I would caveat this is nothing but technical, but this is actually probably so examples of what other districts did for transition costs.
That's not something I really have any information on. This is the first big one, I think, in this county. There's been other places that have done it. We can look into. Yeah, I think that's about all I can say on that.
Yeah.
How many questions do you have?
4.
Okay, I'm a little uncomfortable with, I don't know if the directors can text questions and the public. Mr. Perot, do you have any guidance on that? Do you want to just go, I mean, these sound like good questions to submit to DHS in writing. And
Actually,
allow a more thoughtful.
that may be the most appropriate thing for any director is to submit them in writing. We
Yeah.
could then submit them to you. You could then respond and we can bring it back.
I
I
think
just submitted them to you.
yeah.
Thank you.
I think we'd have a more thoughtful response rather than putting Mr. Johnson on the spot right here.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm sure these are good questions that, you know, that we're all gonna have to face with, because I think we are the first in the county to really.
Carpentry did it with Santa Claus Lane once.
Well, they had a plant, they had a collection system, so they had a much simpler
Yeah, no.
situation. Probably the last one that I'm aware of is the town of Los Alamos, which is our main.
Advice for property owners, we've already done that, so I like that. There's a question.
And my contact information is there too. So if you have a question, please send it to me. Email is preferred just because I'm not always in my office. And that way, if I have to do research or look into it, I actually can. And I don't have to just say, I'll call you back. But yeah, it's okay.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay, I'll now turn to the public. Do we have any? Oh,
Can I
I'm
ask
sorry.
one more question?
Sure.
And if this is not something you're familiar with, we'll just send it later, but what does the county do to monitor the use of wells in the Los Olivos area? Do you get any kind of data from people using the wells, or any kind of check for water quality?
For a private system, so less than 4 connections to that well, it's a private system. The regulations were just for the construction requirements to verify it meets water quality standards. There's no ongoing reporting requirements. It is within the Santa's ID1 boundaries, so they have their own reporting requirements and meter requirements for flows and volume. Via the district, but not to us. If it's more than 4 connections, there is various reporting requirements based on size and numbers, based on what type of classification it is. And those would be both volume and water quality requirements.
So do you know if there are any more than 4 connection wells in Los Olivos area?
Well, there's the main water district wells, so those ones, and those are regulated by the state Division of Drinking Water, and they have a website where you can pull up the water quality results. It's Modified Drinking Water Watch, and I don't know the website offhand, but there is a website, the State Water Board, where you can view, the name or the city, you can find the public water systems in that area and pull up their wells. It doesn't show you location, but you can see water quality.
Very good. That's helpful.
Just to help clarify that. This Heal the Ocean 2020 report. Well, first off, anything greater than becomes a public utility. So it's no longer resident. Now there's also reporting requirements. So we know through a lot of information that we filed here where the public public utility systems are. There's about 3 or 4 in the area. I will do that. And one of the largest concerns is up the canyon where they're having some hotspots. And those are all well published. In fact, there's a great graphic.
Okay, we'll go to public comment. Does anybody from the public have any comments? Crow, can you see if anybody online?
As a part of the Zoom meeting, is there anybody on the Zoom call that has any comments regarding Mr. Johnson's report or anything they want to direct on this item to the board?
Hearing none, close the public hearing on that. It sounds like we have some questions that maybe we can get off and those answers can be sent back to Mr. Perot and circulated to the board. I just wanted to say again, Jason, thank you for taking time to come down here. I think on behalf of the community of Los Olivos, EHS has been very supportive to us with money. We wouldn't be this far if it weren't for the help from EHS. So our community thanks you for everything you've done. So that's it. The comments. This is kind of what would be the appropriate action, Mr. Perot? Receive and file the report, I would assume?
Yeah, essentially, this was a public presentation by
just
you.
informational,
Yeah.
so no action.
Right.
All right. Welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. You're welcome to go home and get on with your life.
We're here for a little while.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's personal comment. Thanks. Also, thanks for everything. I know it's been a transition there. Doesn't go enough.
We'll move on to item 7, the administrative agenda. All matters listed here on the constituted consent agenda will be acted on by single roll call. I think what we'll do, because we have a couple of different items, Mr. Perot, maybe we could take items A and B
Certainly.
separately, if that would be appropriate.
Sure.
Okay. So we'll, the meeting minutes for September 15th and October 4th. Are there any comments from the director?
Mr. Fairham, just to point out, I did issue some additional copies and I sent them out to you via email, primarily correcting grammatical issues.
7A is moved.
I will second that.
In a second, before we have a roll call, is there public comments on item 7? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes of September 5th and 4th. Mr. Pro.
Yes, President Palmer is absent. Vice President Fairham,
Aye.
Director Army is absent. Director O'Neill, Director Ross.
Aye.
The motion passes. Minutes are approved.
Item 7B is invoice payments for Robert Perot, General Manager Services, and GSI for our existing contract for $1,900. I'm sorry, Mr. Perot, $35.
Right.
$10, $19.26 for GSI, and then our final invoice for urban planning concepts. I have one comment. Thank you for your clarification. I would normally take opposition to paying the invoiced amount. It is over the contracted amount, and normally that is not allowed unless there's a change order or something that acknowledges it. However, it's $155, and I fear that we will spend more than $155 in your time, Mr. Perot, and going back and forth. So I'm prepared to support that, but I would caution that any of our contracts, if they're going to exceed that has to be approved, right? You just don't submit an invoice with what you think. Which you'll recall is what I brought up with the Stantec contract as well. So having heard that, any questions from other board members on the invoice?
I have a question. I noticed M&S is not here.
Yes, a couple of reasons for that. One was last month, if you recall, it was on the agenda. They had an invoice on the agenda. President Palmer noted that there were a couple of questions that she wanted to resolve. The board deferred taking action on that invoice. And I have yet to get a response from M&S. The latest invoice just came in too late for the agenda. I would have placed it on here, but it didn't make it in time. So you'll see most likely both of those invoices next month.
This has been reviewed and approved, my understanding of that.
Finance Committee, yes.
Public comments on 7B? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion for approval of item 7.
I will second that.
Moving second, Mr. Fox.
Yes, President Palmer is absent. Vice President Fayram.
Aye.
Director Army is absent. Director O'Neill
Aye.
and Director Ross.
Aye.
Invoices are approved 3-0 with 2 absences.
All right, thank you for that. We move on to business item 8. Items for discussion and action on review and approve the GSI technical memorandum providing preliminary cost estimate information, cost estimate projection, and provide direction regarding planning, remaining tasks. Let's take item 8A. Mr. Pro, do you want to?
Yes, Mr. Fayram, members of the board, obviously I'd hoped that GSI was going to be here and I didn't hear anything contrary to that. It just could be the issues with the traffic, et cetera.
Mr. Pro, this is Tim Thompson.
Oh, you are here. Okay, great.
And Andy Lapasto with our firm is also.
Okay, great. They're in on Zoom. So
Yes.
if that, I will proceed with the report and then possibly we'll hear from GSI. In August, GSI provided the district with a proposed statement of work. That statement of work is attached, and it outlines several tasks that, once completed, would provide the district with the feasibility of implementing an injection program as part of the wastewater treatment project. The estimated cost for completing the feasibility assessment is $217,000. During the August 18th meeting, the board actually authorized GSI to proceed with the first task, which was a high-level estimate of what that injection program would cost. And they've completed that. The cost for that task was $12,254, I believe, and they came in slightly under it. And you have the results of that assessment. We felt it was probably best to that the board take a look at that total before authorizing GSI to proceed with the rest of the work that they have outlined. As you'll note from the technical memorandum that covers again, a high-level estimate cost for in the investment program, you'll note that for the entire district, it is a big figure. It's between $5 and $6 million, if I recall. You note that GSI broke that down in, we'll use the word zones, but as they've indicated, phases, so that you'd have an idea that in the event that the district chose to do this one zone at a time, what that cost might look at. What is before you really tonight is to discuss that cost estimate, and then based on that cost estimate, provide direction to staff and GSI as well in terms of pursuing the rest of those tasks. I do want to mention that, and again, thanks to the county, we received a $124,000 grant to do that and we contracted with GSI to do some of the initial work, which included a hydrogeologic study, as well as the groundwater master plan that we've been talking about. At this point, there is about $35,000 remaining on that contract. And the interesting thing that if the board wishes to pursue the remaining tasks with GSI, the work is somewhat overlapping with what needs to be done in that original task of the original task statement of work and with this feasibility study. So the thought is that we would attempt to merge the two because both of them talk about the need to get the well done so that you could begin doing the tests to determine how feasible injection really is. And, you know, we've talked about it a lot, but certainly the problem that we have right now is there is a dearth of information regarding the groundwater system, and that needs to be resolved one way or the other. But we're at a point right now that the board needs to provide direction regarding continuing with the tasks as outlined in the feasibility study. The importance of it is simply that it is being timed so it'll work with what Stantec is doing. And hopefully, and the hope is that, you know, we'll get to, you know, the design of the project, and we'll have at least a draft of what that project is going to look like from both a system point of view and injection and how that might work. But that is pretty much concludes my remarks. It may be appropriate. You can either ask questions of me now, or you may want to hear from GSI at this point. They may have something to add to what I've just said.
Maybe what we can do is, if there is a quick question from the board, then we can ask GSI. One question I had for the additional work, my understanding, if I read this right, is that's not covered under the additional grant funds that we have, and so this would be at 100% cost to the district?
No.
No?
No, it actually would be a part of the grant would be in fact able to cover a portion of this cost.
How much of that?
Well, you know, and that gets into a whole discussion of dollars. Right now, $150,000 is coming in from the state to be matched by $150,000 in with district funds. That's $300,000. The total work effort under your consultants in the budget is $459,000, and you have resources to fund that. But the point that I wanted to make is that the state grant in part is to pay for feasibility coverage. And so this is definitely determining the feasibility of the actual recyclable approach. So that anyway.
So then with the $300,000 total grant, of which we're paying for half of that.
That's correct.
With the increased cost of the Stantec contract that we approved at our last meeting, that then does not leave grant coverage, which is 50/50. So there would be a balance that we would have to cover at 100%.
Right.
Get an idea of how much of that is, round numbers?
Well, you know, the total 459,000 that you've got allocated for consultant costs also was to include environmental. And so what we're looking at is that, you know, the environmental, we would most likely have to try and find additional money to fund that. The one thing I will mention, and maybe Brian, our Director O'Neill can help me out with this. As we progress, we're going to be watching these expenditures very closely. And the expenditures will be done according to different components of the design. So the thought is that we will be able to work with the budget and come back to the board if necessary for a budget amendment, but that we will manage those costs as we go through the design, whole design effort with both GSI and Stantec.
Furthermore, I don't like, personally, I'm like Tom here, says, I don't like to play with money.
Right.
And, however, that shortfall is not basically going to happen in this fiscal year. And we are aggressively approaching ways to offset that.
Right. And the other thing is it's important to keep the whole element of this moving forward, you know, because we're trying to reach a goal by the end of getting this package for an assessment vote next summer.
Why don't we hear from GSI and then I have more comments.
Okay, Tim, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Is there anything specific, or would you like me just to summarize?
What I would think might be a good idea, you've listened to, you know, my overview. If there's anything I've missed or, you know, haven't seen the way that you have proposed it, please add up those clarifications.
Well, I do think you captured it well, Mr. Perot. You know, that the idea is for us to be able to develop a sense of comfort that the proposed injection project concept will actually work in the physical area of the Los Olivos community. So the idea is to do what we call home, you know, sort of like homework. It would build upon the work we've done already and include some actual on-site testing, include the installation of a test well into the aquifer unit called the Paso Robles Formation, which is the main unit of the area, to assess the characteristics of that unit. And then we can use that to determine if we can reasonably expect that injection will be able to be accomplished at sufficient rates so that, you know, only a modest number of injection wells would be needed for the ultimate build out of the project. So the idea is to do the work, actually install and test a well in an appropriate area. It doesn't have to be the same spot as where the potential treatment plant would be located, but it needs to be, you know, in a reasonable spot that would be able to accept the water from the treatment plant for you know, future injection, and then do that testing and then use those results to basically refine the high level cost analysis with a little more accuracy in terms of what the well construction would be like for each injection well, kind of depths and size, and then what kind of injection rates can be anticipated. And also to look at a few ancillary things such as, is there any question whether injection would cause some sort of geochemical reaction in the aquifer? It's most unlikely, but we want to know that early on if there's any potential issues in terms of the chemistry. And then also to get some basic groundwater data to help develop a groundwater model, which will be able to illustrate with the series of injection wells, how much could you inject, where would it go, what would be its migration rate, and a few key parameters like that, which are important both for basic operations of the system as proposed and also for regulatory requirements that are going to be needed. That's kind of, and another piece we do is we need to look at where other wells are and do a real deep dive into other existing wells that are within the Paso Robles formation, their location, their construction, to the extent those data can be discovered and made available to us. And there's various sources for that. That's also an important piece to know what other effects or considerations are relevant in as we go forward with planning this type of a program. I hope that helps a little bit. I could go on and on, but I figure I'll try to keep it brief.
Okay, thank you for that. So I know, we discussed the value of the injection. It puts, cleaner water back in the aquifer. It's, certainly a way you have to get rid of the effluent some way. And I know in different treatment plants, there's stream discharge, there's sprinkler irrigation, injection, any others, Mr. Johnston?
Percolation.
Percolation, thank you. Yeah, well, injection is a way of forced percolation, I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, that sprinkler irrigation is just evaporation, really. When you look at the cost of this between 5.3 to 6.5 million just for the installation, that elevates the cost of our overall system. And so I don't know what I expected, but I don't know that I expected that number. And then I would just note that 200 to 350,000 as our annual O&M. If we're on the upper end, that's approaching $1,000 per year for every resident just in the O&M of the injection system, not the plant and collection system. So what we're seeing here is that the reality of what this thing is going to cost is going to start to become more and more apparent to us as a community and how we're going to deal with it. I personally like the idea of injection, but if there's a more, less costly alternative, then I want to look at that too. I'm growing more and more hesitant with the speed of what we're trying to get all these answers. I think I've mentioned to you, Mr. Pro, the fastest way to slow this down is to go too fast. And so I'm concerned about this. You can't go and do this type of stuff that will have fiscal implications for our community for the next several decades by not looking at all the options. I don't know what, I guess I'm not comfortable with approving the extra money out of our budget at this point, unless I know exactly how much comes out of that work plan and then what does suffer, because like I think was mentioned, if that was money identified to do our environmental, then that gets kicked down the road. And how do we have an assessment vote where we don't know what the real costs of this are? And worse yet, we think we know what the costs are, but we don't. So I'm just concerned. And I'm having growing concerns about this because of the implications. So I guess I might suggest we put this off 1 month until we have a more complete board. And the other is to have Mr. Pro come back and explain to us exactly what the financial implications of this would be on the rest of our work. Remember, we've increased the contract for Stantec, which I think is a good idea because we need to have, the worst thing we could do is design phase 1 of our system and not be able to connect the balance of the town. That would be an absolute disaster. So we did the right thing there. I just don't know about doing this additional work at this time or not. So I'll ask for other board member comments.
So I have 8 questions, and they're not so much to do with the budget, but other things, just so I can understand. So if you know the answers, great. If you don't right now, maybe we can get you to respond later. So first question is, you mentioned that we need to have the test well pretty close to where we think the treatment plant will be or where we're going to do the injection. So how close is close enough?
Well, thank you for the question. I actually tried to explain that it doesn't need to be that close. It needs to be in the area of the as we think the aquifer is fairly, I don't know, not homogeneous, but I mean, we could probably drill in a lot of places around the community and get basically the same. We don't know that until we put in a whole ton of wells, but from what we've seen, it seems fairly consistent in the aquifer properties. So we don't need to be that close to where the ultimate treatment plant is located.
Okay, so the real question, I guess, is if we do the test well at one end of the district and end up siting at the other end, the treatment plant, is that going to be a problem? I mean, is the risk large or small that will be a problem?
I would think that would be small. I mean, usually treatment, I'm not a treatment plant engineer, I'm a hydrogeologist, but usually they're located in the downhill end of the of the community. And so if that's where the plant is and the wells, if there's well sites in that area, that would be fine. So I think there's a lot, actually, I think there's a lot, I was trying to convey, I think there's a lot of flexibility of where the test well could be. And it could be sited near or at the same location as the proposed treatment plant, but it's not, I don't think that's critical or an absolute requirement given the hydrogeology. Really what you want to do is ensure that the well field, the multiple wells that are going to be needed for the full injection capacity aren't too close to any existing potable wells that would be down gradient because of because you need many months of migration time to be demonstrated between the injection point and any other wells pumping from the same unit.
Well, if I could just beg off that, Dr. Ross, is that so while it's true your injection well can be anywhere, you're talking about if the injection wells, let's say the plant is I don't know what's the size of the district, let's just say a mile. You're talking about a lift station, potentially in addition to other lift stations, to lift that water to that site and inject it. And I don't know if that's included in the cost estimate of 5 to 5.3 to 6.5 million. So I think with that
Transmission.
okay. So a mile of force main, okay.
Yeah, I mean, you would want to avoid that if you could. Yes. Yeah. And we didn't include, our cost estimate is just the wells. Kind of like our work kind of ends at the wellhead flange, if you will. Anything pumping or pipeline requirements to convey the water, that would be, in our view, kind of more on the engineer's side of things of the overall treatment plant and conveyance facilities associated with the treatment.
So you're saying it's up to us to connect the wastewater treatment plant to the injection well?
I'm sorry?
You're telling us that it's up to the district to pay a separate amount to connect the wastewater treatment plant with the injection well?
Well, I mean, that would be all part of the treatment plant facilities is that the treatment, the collection, treatment, and then conveyance of the treated water to the injection locations. I would, in our perspective, other projects we've done, that's always been a part of the overall treatment facility is the ultimate conveyance of the fully treated water to the point of injection.
Support that. That aspect is included in the construction of this. The conveyance to the treatment plant and from the treatment plant to the actual vessel.
So
Not in the
Stantec-
hydro.
Stantec's gonna
Stantec's
capture it.
yes.
They know that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Transmission is included in the engineering.
Okay, very good. Okay, next question. You talk about doing a groundwater model, and then you talk about taking some kind of measurements to try to prove out the model. Can you give us a little bit of an idea of what kind of measurements, how that's going to work?
Well, sure. Thank you. Good. That's a good question. Some of the measurements would be that from the testing of the test well, where we do a pumping test in the test well to get accurate characteristics of the aquifer, how much water can be transmitted through the aquifer, what kind of pumping rates, what kind of drawdown is required to achieve a certain pumping rate. So that information would be used along with other well information that some of which we've already gathered and some of which is scoped to be gathered as part of this proposed effort. That would be used in combination for that to develop a groundwater model, again, to identify the migration rate of the injected water through the aquifer. One thing that's fundamental to the regional board permit required for this kind of project is to ensure that the water has a minimum, what they call a retention time, or travel time through the aquifer before it reaches its nearest existing sort of potable well. So the information from the test well and both the testing and just like water levels and things like that we would capture will be used to develop that groundwater model and get that retention time calculation. So because we need to know that early on in terms of being able to assess compliance with the regional board permitting requirements.
Okay.
With that, I've done a lot of groundwater modeling throughout this area, as GSI has. The Feel the Ocean report has a very good summary of how to do the model and getting the geotechnical and geophysical chemistry, transmissivity, detention, percolation, gradient, everything like that. It's a really good synopsis. I'd be happy with that.
Okay, you talk about doing a survey of existing wells in the district. So what kind of wells are you going to be looking at? Is it just the bigger ones or also smaller private ones? How does that work?
It would be mainly the larger wells, but as many as we can get data on. We've had a challenge in the early work for the district, which mostly focused on many of the shallow wells in the area, and there was quite a dearth, as to use the word that Mr. Perot mentioned. There was a real dearth of data on most of those. Some of the deeper wells that are in the Paso Robles formation, we anticipate there will be data through the county and possibly through the State Department of Water Resources. And we can do that sort of investigation as part of this to get as far along as we can with understanding what's already in the ground and what's being used. We know that ID1 has a well right there, and there may be others. And so some of it depends. We're going to want to get as much as we can around in the actual district area and the immediate vicinity around that. And we're hoping that maybe we can, if we can't get what we need through the county or the state, perhaps some of the local agencies would be willing to share some information with the district to help better characterize, understand the construction and the usage of nearby wells.
Okay. Yeah, I think the county has good information on that.
Mhm.
Okay. You mentioned the test well drilling cost was not included in your estimate. So is that because it's a risky, unknown cost type of thing, or what's the reasoning why it wasn't included?
To obtain that, we put out a bid. We need to solicit bids from qualified contractors. So that is a cost that's not incorporated in our budget for this scope. It could be that's a sort of a standard of practice that we follow, where things like a driller cost are direct. We do the oversight and the sort of the management, but the costs are usually billed directly to the district.
So that means we have the risk. So you're talking about a test well and perhaps a monitoring well. So what kind of cost would you envision? What kind of range of cost would you envision for those two wells?
Well, it'll surely, it'll be $100,000 or more, sir.
For the 2 wells?
Something like that. Andy, did you have a better guess of that? Andy's
Hey.
on the phone.
Hi, yeah, this is Andy with GSI here. You're right. It should be at least that much, Tim. But one of the things that you have to think about is, do we want to install like a really cheap test well where we get some data and then we just have to abandon the thing, or do you want to invest a little more money to it up front so it could be used later? One of our ideas actually was to install a test well of higher quality, which would give you more, which would cost more upfront. But if we were to proceed with injection down the line, that test well could be used, potentially as a backup well if necessary for the injection system. And, it kind of, depending on how you frame it, there is opportunity for cost savings depending on how much you put into the test well up front. But to answer your question, I would say on the cheaper end, to do a test well of the depth that would be required and a monitoring well to act as an observation well for a pump test, it would be at least $100,000.
Okay, and what would it be if we were to go the higher quality route?
Well, talking higher quality, we're kind of talking, stainless steel casing. So that would add at least 50,000, something like that. And it'd be a more robust facility all around.
So it'd be 150 total?
I would say that'd still be on the low end, and it's kind of hard to say just because, drillers have different prices for everything, and the cost of stainless steel is constantly changing right now. I'd expect it to be on the order of a stainless steel test well. I would expect to be on the order of closer to like 300,000 or something like that.
Yeah, that's why we didn't put it in here, because to do some of the work, to do the design concepts is part of the work. So we didn't want to speculate too far on that side of things until we kind of got into the more the details of the design of the well. If it could be located in a place that looks like it could be a semi-permanent long-term location, perhaps with the aligned with the location of the treatment plant or not. It kind of, there was a lot of variables there that we were uncomfortable speculating on until we had a little more of the work effort under our belt.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to jump in here and do a couple clarifications on this. Go ahead.
Okay, no,
Okay.
I'm gonna say that this is getting too far for 3 board members.
Sure.
And I'm getting more and more uncomfortable. I'm not gonna support this moving forward today now based on what I heard of that cost, which we have to be part of, does not include a $200,000 well, which is the point of the whole, right? And where is that money gonna come from? And we're rapidly running ourselves out of money to be able to do anything. And we need to do the work. I don't dispute the work. I dispute the time and the money out of pocket without having, we get, just to put it in perspective, our annual budget for the taxpayers of this community is about $200,000. You're talking about an additional study of 200,000, another 200,000 plus for a well. You're talking 2 years worth of our assessment that we don't know if we're going to get money for or not. So this is starting to get, we're going too fast to get too slow. I'm just going to say that. Go ahead, Director.
Okay. You guys at GSI, chime in if I'm going off on the wrong tangent. When we first got GSI on board, we knew that we could not calculate the well cost. We didn't know where the aquifer was, how deep it was. Are we going to go mud rotary? Are we going to go to hollow stem drilling? Are we going to go to the first aquifer, last aquifer, deep aquifer, whatever it was going to be? There was no way to cost that out. we determined that we were going to do the desktop survey. And that's one of the reasons why GSI came to figure out what those costs are and that they would get into the board. Although we're getting close, we still don't know. Okay. And the other things are to mention is if we do the initial test wells and monitoring wells in a higher end into the right formation, we're going to offset that and a whole bunch more in the construction phase. So that's why we need to get the feasibility aspect in here to help us choose those, along with direction and everything like that. So there's stuff that we have, there's items that we have brought up and that we have agreed upon. And now this information is coming out. So I agree that we need to slow down to go faster. But this is along the plan that we were working.
Well, it's a critical element.
It's a huge element.
Yeah, and I get that.
We're getting there.
Yeah.
Okay, so these are great questions. A table for the full board, but this is right along the lines of what we scoped out.
Okay, I'm gonna not do all 8 questions, but one last one.
Okay.
Right, it looks like the operations and maintenance costs would be between $500 and $1,000 a day to operate this injection system. Could you explain what the costs are tied into? Is it electricity or paying somebody to do something? What is the cost all about?
There's some regular monitoring that'll be required through the regional board permit for this type of project. There's going to be regular monitoring, water quality sampling, and generation of annual, probably quarterly and annual reports to the regional board to document what's being injected, what the water quality is, how the system's being operated, and things like that. So that's that's an estimate. This is a high level estimate, but we know there's got to be, we've been through these we call these indirect potable reuse programs, and we're actually involved in several of these around the state. And the permitting package is non-trivial that they'll require. So it could be at the lower end of that. It'll probably will be, but until we get all the way through it, we didn't want to lowball the district thinking that it would be less than it possibly could be. So.
Right.
How often do you have to sample?
Yeah, there's kind of regular sampling required of both the injection well and almost every injection well is going to have eventually, when the system's built, it's going to have a sort of a sister monitoring well down gradient a certain distance. And that's actually the compliance point, is to show that after the water's traveled for so many weeks or months in the aquifer, and you take a sample, that you can demonstrate that you're meeting all the water quality requirements for the protection of, for a good reason, for the protection of public health.
Right. So what's the frequency of the sampling?
It'll be, there's probably some monthly and some quarterly. There's probably, some minor stuff on a monthly basis. Each permit's a little bit different, but it'll be something like that. And then maybe more comprehensive on a quarterly basis.
This is Andy again. I'd just like to add one thing that's not always obvious to non-hydrogeologists, but an injection well is a little bit unlike a regular pumping well, in that, a lot of folks put in a pumping well and it's kind of just to set it and forget it. You construct the thing, you turn it on, you get water. But with injection wells, there's a lot more kind of effort that needs to be done to maintain good production. And one of the things with an injection well is, you wouldn't think it, but you have to have a pump installed, because one of the things you have to do regularly is back flush the well, which means you can inject for a couple weeks at a time, but you have to have a pump in there to be able to pull water through and develop. I might be butchering this, Tim, so chime in.
You do it fine.
But there's a lot more maintenance involved that it's not exactly obvious to keep the injection well in good condition. So that's another aspect that you'll have to have, staff regularly back flushing and doing maintenance on these things to keep them in shape. Because the last thing you want to happen is to have, problems with a well, and a well goes offline, and all of a sudden you have more wastewater that you can't get rid of, and that's one of the reasons why in our initial cost estimate, we might, it's definitely expensive, but we also added, an additional well, which might cost $1 million, but you have to have some kind of backup just in case you don't have any other options. So
one of the things that's not being brought up here during this discussion is the compliance aspect for the sampling. The Regional Water Board is going to issue through the permitting process a WDR, or waste discharge requirement.
Mhm.
And in that is going to have all their sampling requirements. The daily sampling will be basically direct reading monitors, probes. Let's just say that the monthly stuff will be grab samples by the operators, and the quarterly or annually stuff will probably be done by actual groundwater monitoring, which hopefully will be able to be put into the costs associated with this, the county stuff. What needs to be recognized is that Maddie's has a waste discharge report going on for their drip irrigation, okay, that requires almost the same type of sample. Okay, anything we're going to do, we have to remember that the most expensive part about this is disposal of the effluent, and that's why these costs are much higher than you probably would imagine. Now, the big thing here is no matter what we do, we have to get rid of that effluent. No matter how we get rid of the effluent, it's going to require WDR, and it will require monitoring along these lines. So this is not specific to the injection system. Okay? They have to have pumps over here for their drip irrigation. That drip irrigation probably has a higher operation and maintenance cost and takes up a larger footprint. So there are cost offsets that GSI will be looking at. Tim, can you hold me up on that?
Yeah, that's well characterized, Brian. Yeah. The only other, if I may, can I offer one other thought, is if there's an existing well in the vicinity that the district could either obtain permission to use to do some testing and sampling, or purchase and use for the long term, there's, that's a potential cost saving opportunity. I know there's an ID1 well there. I have no idea if they're interested in sharing it or working with the district. I know there's been some discussions with the ID1 folks, and I know broadly they're generally supportive of this concept. That's a way to offset some of the initial cost if that kind of arrangement could be coupled together.
I think the comment was brought up that if we had discharged the grade, that it would be cheaper or potentially a little bit offsetting. Can you explain the level of wetland monitoring and Corps of Engineering discharge 404, 401 permits?
The 401 permit is not a 404 permit. So,
Was that Mr. O'Neill? So the question is the potential viability of discharging into the creek with the treated wastewater? Is that your question?
Sure.
That's got to have, well, I don't know how well that would go by, how well that would, if that would fly. So I'll be, if that would fly with the regional board. And the same as percolation ponds or discharging to the creek. That's another question altogether. And I think there need to be some discussions with some of the folks of the regional board to, if that could be, what the requirements would be to allow that to be permitted.
Okay, what's the pleasure of the board that's here tonight? What do you want to do?
Let me ask a procedural question. Tim, if we kind of hold off a month on this, this additional funding, will it impact your continuing effort over the next 6 weeks?
Well, I think we're kind of in a holding pattern now. We've completed the work that requested by Mr. Perot on the high-level cost analysis. We've completed the groundwater monitoring plan and hydrogeologic conceptual model. And we put together some cost estimates for the monitoring of the shallow groundwater, which is a kind of a different piece of effort from the injection side of things. There's the idea of the multiple monitoring wells to understand the extent and the concentration of nitrates in the shallow unit is that piece sort of really that addresses the special problems area issue. The injection effort is a different piece of work. And currently we've completed the task that Mr. Perot has asked us to do, and that we're, patiently, it's fine if the board needs more time to figure out what to do with the feasibility, or a different structure of a feasibility evaluation would be more beneficial. So to answer your question, it won't affect us because we're kind of in a holding pattern for the moment anyways.
All right, thank you, Tim.
Yeah.
Let me go to public comment. Thank you to the GSI folks for that. Is there any public comment on this?
Yes, it's playing in the community and it's right down the road, Ballard is becoming exactly the same thing. Doesn't make any sense to see that preventative system a couple miles down the road. Seems like this 25 to 27 million is rapidly going to turn into 40. To really just offset the business of this downtown.
Any comment from members on Zoom? We now close the public comment period. Public hearings. Back to the board. What's your preference?
So we have two different things we're looking at. One is approval of their $12,000 work effort.
Right.
Right.
The other is whether we give them a table.
Well, I would just suggest we table that because I'm not going to support it tonight because I don't know what the true monetary impact to us is, and I don't know if we can take that step. I do appreciate the work that they did. We're not shooting the messenger on the 5 million, the 6 million. We need to know what this is. We don't need something candy coated. So if that's the case, what if we take a motion to accept the work for the $12,000? $12,500. Separate.
So moved on accepting the invoice payment for under A.
Well, actually approving the work that they've done thus far is what it is.
I think are we receiving and filing their work?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So what about the questions I have? I prefer to have that incorporated in
So
initial report.
I think
There is a suggestion, if I may. This is a really critical issue, obviously. And it is something that all three of you are very focused on, and you've heard from the consultant. Maybe it's a time that we ought to think about doing a work study session just on, this part of the issue, if you will, and all of its ramifications, and what options are available to the board in the district, because it's kind of critical right now. Eventually you've got to give GSI or whomever you're going to continue to have work on the issue some direction. So my thinking is we need a more extensive discussion at this point, maybe on this issue, than what would take place during a normal meeting.
Well, Mr. Crowe, I would totally agree with that. It's a good suggestion. When you look at the questions that, you know, some of the directors have, they're good questions. And those aren't the questions that you ask just before you're about to approve something like this.
Sure.
So those are questions you kind of are more comfortable with in advance, and then it's more of a, you know, the fine tuning it. So I personally like that idea and would allow for the questions that Director Ross, the GSI, could incorporate for review, Bob, into a report and talk about those items. Again, this is a critical piece of work. I'm not disputing it. I'm disputing that making sure that we're adequately funded to do all the things we need to do. And then understanding the cost to this community and making sure that, you know, as I mentioned before, the ultimate installation of this, I believe, is going to need grant support from the state, or the residents won't support it. I don't know that I'll support it personally if we don't have, we have 430 connections for a project like this.
Oh.
It has to be a sustainable project, otherwise we'll fail. So,
Right.
I've said that before, I'll keep saying that. So, which is part of the problem with, as we eyeing an assessment vote, we need to know what the assessment vote is and how much grant money we have and what the true cost of the project is. That's a lot of things that we have to get going on. What would you suggest? Would you suggest we table this and direct you to come back with a work session?
Yes, you know, that essentially table this for any further action tonight. I'm suggesting that we would come back in a work study session and take a look at what GSI has thus far presented, answer your questions, try and look at it from a budget point of view at the same time.
That's an important element.
And then after that work study session, you know, you would proceed to a regular meeting and then be in a better position to provide direction.
Board member want to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that in accordance with what is it? A, that we table this, schedule a working session to include an invitation to GSI and Stantec.
The sound is cut off on my end. Sorry to interrupt.
Looks like we might have lost them.
Yeah, it looks like we did. I'm gonna call Bob and have him stop the meeting until we're joined back in.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Trindle.
All right, for everybody who was on Zoom, the loss of the connection was due to a battery, and they don't have a backup power source. So The meeting is not going to continue. It's going to adjourn at 7:41. And the balance of the agenda will be picked up either at a called special meeting or at the next regular meeting in November.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks,
Okay.
everyone.